Welcome to the Project Endure podcast, the place where we talk about life, endurance, persistence, perspective, and so much more. I'm Joe Rinaldi, and I'll be your host. Let's jump in. Before we get started, let me share a quote with you. The great Les Brown once said, "You can't see the picture when you're in the frame." If you felt stuck in your fitness, mindset, or life as a whole, head down to the link in the show notes and reach out to learn more about Project Endure Coaching so that we can help you step outside of the frame and bridge the gap between who you are now and who you want to be. We can't wait to hear from you. Now, let's get to the episode. Welcome back to the Project Endure podcast, episode 74. We have myself, Joe Rinaldi, and we have a very, 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 very special guest down in Texas, Shea Klink. Shea, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing so well. I was just telling Adam before we hopped on that I'm actually more nervous for some reason to talk to you tonight than I was the first time I ever met him. And I'm not sure why.
I don't know. I don't bite. I'm honestly pretty nervous too. This is my first podcast, so I am honored, and I'm so excited to be here and talk.
Oh, that's so awesome. Okay, so we're going to get into some great conversation, but first, I have to congratulate you on the Dallas Marathon. You just ran an incredible race. I'm assuming that's a PR for you, right?
Yes, thank you. First off, thank you. Yes, but that was actually my first ever marathon, and really only second race. I've only ever done a half marathon, so complete PR in many aspects.
And does that bring you then to Boston as the next step?
It does. Yes, I did qualify for Boston, which is incredible. That wasn't necessarily the goal going into it, but is definitely a nice thing to say after that.
Yeah, that's so cool. So I am curious, how did your running journey start? Were you a runner? Were you into fitness before you met Adam?
Yes. So before I met Adam, I was into fitness. My mom was a personal trainer my entire life. So essentially grew up in a gym. And then I played soccer growing up. I did soccer and a little bit of track throughout middle school, high school. And then I ended up finding CrossFit probably towards the end of my high school years, and did CrossFit, stumbled into CrossFit Krypton where I met Adam. And then, fitness just obviously stuck with us.
So two questions. One, are you the real athlete in this relationship? Kind of seems like it.
After Sunday, I might say so.
And then second,
although I don't know. Seeing Leadville and going through Leadville, I don't know. He might take the cake on that one.
actually, I would love to hear about that from you because we had Adam on the podcast, episode 10, and it's been a while. So Leadville happened between now and then. So I'll get your thoughts on that. But my second question is, was it love at first sight when you saw Adam?
Yes, 100%. Our story, and I'm sure everybody will say this, but our love story is truly my favorite and truly just like, I feel like a movie. Kind of long story short, we were both in separate relationships. They both happened to end. We were strictly athlete and coach at the gym. And through conversation, he made a comment to somebody of like, that's the girl I'm going to marry. And I heard that, and the relationship that I was in at the time was on its way out essentially. And I heard that, and I just, no questions, dropped everything, came back to Virginia, and the rest is history. We started dating. A year later, we were engaged. A year later, we were married. And as he said, and now we just have 2 kids. So.
Wow. So Adam said to a friend or somebody else that he was going to marry you before you two even started dating.
Yeah. And before we really even knew each other, again, we casually knew each other at the gym, but had never really had any conversation outside of the walls of the gym. So how he knew, I don't know. But I'm pretty glad he went with his gut on that one.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
So for people listening to the podcast, they may or may not know much about you. And I would love for you to just introduce yourself. You can start wherever, you can tell your whole story, you can keep it simple. But if you wanted to tell the world who is Shea Klink, what would you say?
That's a really hard question. And being completely, candid, I feel like part of my identity has always been behind Adam. And I feel like over the past year, I'm starting to get my own, for lack of a better term, spotlight, I guess. Which is exciting, but also weird at the same time. When we were driving up to Dallas, I had a moment of like, this is very weird, because we were driving somewhere for me, for an event for me, people were traveling and coming in, and I'm so used to it being the opposite. So man, what do I want people to know about Shea Klink? Well, as my Instagram bio says, I guess I'm a wife and I'm a mom, and they're two of my greatest titles. I absolutely am obsessed with my husband and my boys. And I love Jesus and I love working out. I think that those would be some of the top things that I would tell people. Again, so like I shared with my story with meeting Adam, we got married, were and are madly in love and have started a beautiful family. We've been in Texas for almost 2 years now. And again, I feel like at this season in our life, we're raising boys and we're chasing after goals and dreams. And it's truly been an incredible year. And I think our future just looks so great at this point.
Wow.
Like, that's a really hard question to kind of tell people what you want them to know about yourself, I guess.
That was a really great answer. And
Well, thank you.
I have to say first, before I forget, Words with Noah was hands down my favorite part of Instagram until it ended. Just amazing.
I still look back on some of those videos and we die laughing at them all the time. It's funny, we tried to start Words with Wyatt, but as him being the second child and the amount of communication that he has from adults and Noah, his language is just so clear, like that there's not many mistakes or mishaps to like record that are funny. Noah's super into dinosaurs and he'll be like, oh, hey, Wyatt, do you want this monoclonius? And Wyatt's just like, yeah, monoclonius. And we're like, okay, well, he's such a parrot at this point. So he doesn't quite have as many funny ones, but yeah, Words with Noah those were good.
Yeah, that was really good. So when's the third child coming?
Not too sure. There were talks of, okay, after Leadville, maybe. And then it was like, okay, well, I want to run a marathon. And then it was like, okay, maybe after the marathon. And now we've got Boston in the not too near future. And then there's a potential for attempt at Leadville again. So there's just some things in the future that throwing a newborn in there might not quite make sense, but there will be a number 3, God willing.
Okay, that was a joke, by the way, but I'm glad that there's a number 3 because it's
there's a serious answer out there, and I'm sure people are actually genuinely curious. So yes, for anybody curious, stay tuned.
Nice. Well, it sounds like you guys have your hands very full. And on Adam's episode of the podcast, we talked about marriage and some of the challenges that come along with just balancing work and your own hopes and dreams and a family. And I'm curious for you kind of what everyday life looks like, because from Instagram, it looks really, really awesome. It looks like you get to spend a lot of quality time with your boys. It looks like you guys have a lot of fun, and obviously you were training hard, but behind the camera, what does life look like on a day to day?
Yeah, we definitely do have our hands full. My day is definitely, I would say, a bit more routine just with the boys. It's a lot of the same things, just with their schedule and again, routine. But as far as like my working out or training, I try to get up, have my feet on the ground anywhere from 5:30, 5:45. And again, when I was running, it was, out the door running, or now it's in the garage working out. And then Adam has to leave for work by 8 a.m. So I'm ready for mom mode by 8 a.m. My parents thankfully live a mile away, and my mom is no longer working, so she can come over every morning and she helps me out with the boys, which is such a blessing. So our mornings kind of vary, whatever activities keeping the boys entertained. And then, nap time for them, which I either get to work out again or do whatever work I need to do. Adam gets home, and then it's the chaos of dinner, bath time, bedtime. And then as the chaos ends, getting to spend time with Adam, kind of relax for the evening, and then, any other chores we need to do essentially. And he'll either work out again or we'll just kind of chill and unwind for the rest of the night. But yeah, kind of the same in and out every day, but that morning consistency of getting up and kind of having that me time to work out and get some movement in is a non-negotiable, hands down.
Yeah. I used to think that, and again, I don't have kids, but I used to think that working out was selfish in a way and taking that time in the morning. And then I realized that it was actually the opposite. It was really selfless, because if I didn't work out in the morning, I wasn't my best for my wife, for my clients, for my friends and family. And it sounds like you feel the same.
Absolutely. I was telling Adam the other day, because again, I'm fresh off of this marathon. My body is still 100% in recovery, but any movement that I'm finding that I can do that still feels good at the time, I'm out there in the garage doing it. Because also just the routine of waking up and being able to start my day before the chaos of life happening is really key to me. But then again, just moving and getting my heart rate up a little bit, I feel so much better, and it just sets the tone for the rest of my day. Again, obviously rest is needed when it's needed, but definitely getting that in there it's totally needed. And again, very, very selfless.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, I don't know if I said this or I heard it somewhere and think that I said it, but sometimes you need to be selectively selfish so that you can be sustainably selfless. And I think that's one example. And I'm sure there are plenty other examples in parenthood, in marriage, and in life that you can probably draw on. But to get to some of the deeper stuff, I'd love to ask you a pretty simple question. But when you think back on your life so far, what's the hardest thing that you've ever had to handle? So a circumstance that you didn't necessarily get to choose for yourself.
Yeah. So one thing that comes to mind, going way back in my childhood is, I grew up in a divorced home. So that was definitely something that I didn't get to choose. Now, thinking back, I was so young when it happened. It wasn't necessarily super difficult. It was just kind of what I knew. But now being an adult, looking back, realizing that it really actually was kind of a hard thing to navigate, especially as a child. Again, that is something that comes to mind initially, but the other thing that comes to mind, and again, just relates to me being a mom, was when I had our first son, Noah. I went into labor and totally expected to have, the vision of what you see in the movies of a delivery, and that wasn't the case. I actually labored for like 22 hours and then had to have a C-section, which in the moments of after laboring for 22 hours to then be told that you have to have this major surgery is terrifying, especially when literally that 22 hours ago I had gotten my first IV ever. So to then go in and have this major surgery, that was definitely a hard pill to swallow. And again, totally a circumstance that I was out of my control. So having to kind of in that moment and so quickly navigate all of the feelings that I was feeling, kind of worrying about Adam and my family and everything, that was definitely really difficult and really challenging. And even after the fact, it was hard to accept that I felt like I was robbed of an experience that I had anticipated for 9 months. So I definitely struggled with that for a little while after that.
Did you say that when you found out you were going to have a C-section that you were worried about Adam and your families?
Yeah, yeah, because I mean, everybody had been there. Well, Adam and my mom, my dad, and his mom had been there for, again, going on 22 hours essentially, and everybody was invested in, meeting their grandchild, or our son, their grandchild, and everybody was there and invested in that. And so then to then be thrown into surgery, it was like it threw everybody for a loop.
Wow, to be in that state of mind where you get told you're gonna have a C-section after 22 hours of labor, and you're thinking about the other people who are involved is really selfless, honestly. But so you have the C-section, Noah's born. Everybody is okay after that, for the most part.
Yes, everything was totally healthy. It was just a matter of, it just wasn't going to happen the way that we had all planned. So it was the safest option for everybody. But yes, it was a very smooth, easy, quick, healthy situation.
Good. So you guys now have your first son. You go home. You're getting used to being a mom. I would imagine that that's probably a challenging transition, to say the least.
Yeah, that in itself is very challenging. Yes.
What was the hardest part of becoming a parent? Yeah, what was the hardest part?
Gosh, I mean, there's so many things that come to mind, but I think it's just kind of finding your new normal essentially. And I mean, now looking back, I even have to laugh at that, because it's like, you don't even find a new normal, I wouldn't say, until, a year plus after having your baby. And even then it's like they're constantly changing. I don't even know if we still know our new normal, but I think it's just adjusting to, I mean, as a woman that's just given birth to a baby, like getting used to your body after having a baby, getting used to what your relationship now looks like with your spouse and even your family. And then you have this tiny human that you have to try to figure out everything that it needs and wants. So it's kind of like juggling all of those, while also taking care of yourself physically and mentally. So I think it's just like that balancing act of kind of figuring it all out at the same time, because there's so many new things thrown at you.
Yeah. What was the transition back to fitness like after, having Noah?
Yeah, so that also didn't go as planned. Again, with having a C-section, the recovery time's a bit different, and just longer. For me, I was super fortunate that I literally worked out up until the day that I gave birth, or that I went into the hospital. So I think that helped me tremendously in my recovery. But we also, again, very fortunately have a ton of equipment in our garage. So I just took it really slow getting back into things, and just listening to my body, doing what was comfortable. And then, as time went on, increasing the intensity and just giving myself tons and tons of grace throughout the whole process.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm sure grace is really important there. So I have a follow-up question there, and then a second follow-up question unrelated. So let's start with the related follow-up. You had mentioned in your introduction that you love Jesus, and it sounds like faith is a really big part of your life, as it is mine. What role does faith play in kind of this whole process of, being pregnant, giving birth not the way you expected, becoming a mom? Does faith become hard at any point throughout that process, or is faith the thing that gets you through that whole thing?
I would say it's a mix of both. I think that there were definitely times, throughout my journey of becoming, a new mom, and throughout those first, weeks and months of really struggling. Sometimes, these curveballs thrown at you, and it's kind of like you start questioning things, and at moments you're angry, and it's kind of like, why me? Why this? Why is this happening? This isn't the way I think it's supposed to be. But then at times when, again, those same situations, you can have a moment of clarity and realize this is exactly how it's supposed to be. And what can I be learning in this moment? What can I take from this? Or then in hindsight, after those hard moments have passed, kind of that light bulb of like, okay, I see what that was for. I can see now with clarity the purpose of that.
Mm. Yeah, I can relate to that. Obviously, not becoming a mom, but just that the dichotomy of faith can be really hard, and it can be really, really powerful at the same exact time. And we can go back and forth between those two extremes. And the faith journey, just like any other journey, is not necessarily linear. And I think what makes it beautiful is that to have faith, you have to continue to believe and trust in something that you can't necessarily see or touch. And yeah, I appreciate you sharing that.
Yeah, absolutely. And another thing that comes to mind, and when I think about, faith again, how it can be really hard, but also so beautiful, is it was actually within our first year of having Noah. And I know that Adam has shared about this some, and I have too, but I think a major part of our story. But Noah he was about 10 months old, and we were in this tiny little house that was our first house. And one evening we came home. This is very long story short, but our house had been robbed and completely just torn apart, like something you would see in a bad movie, like everything out of drawers, cabinets, all over the floor, completely destroyed. And in that moment, it was like, God, how in the world could you let this happen to us? This is our first house. This is our home for our little boy. Like, how is this a part of our story? Like, why is this happening? And 2.5 years later, we look back now, and our joke is that God said, get robbed and see what happened. Because literally ever since that day, the blessings that have come after that day have been incredible. And just looking back at everything that's happened since then, and kind of realizing that had we not gotten robbed, how many of those things wouldn't have happened it almost like gives me chills. So again, that balance of faith of like, it can be so frustrating and so hard, but also again, just exactly what you need in those moments.
That was actually my second unrelated follow-up question, but it turns out it was related. Yeah, I was curious your take on that situation, because when Adam shared that on the podcast 64 episodes ago, I was not a homeowner. And since then, my wife and I have become homeowners. And thinking of that story, not being a homeowner versus being a homeowner, it just hits different. And the level of violation that I can only imagine, I don't even know how I would handle that or recover from that. But what you said is really beautiful. It reminds me of my favorite quote. It's the one behind my only tattoo, from Christine Kane, who said, sometimes when you're in a dark place, you think you've been buried, but you've actually been planted. And I think that pretty much sums up faith.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like that was truly the day I feel like we were planted 100%. I love that.
So that kicks off kind of this process, and you guys end up in Texas. And so you guys moved to Texas, and it sounds like your mom also moved to Texas.
Yes, I am extremely close with my mom and my stepdad, who I call my dad. He's essentially my dad, my father figure. But yes, so back in Virginia, we had recently moved. We were within a mile of them at their house in Chesapeake, and we thought we were going to be there long term. It was perfect case scenario, within walking distance. Adam gets the job offer at BPN, whole process, we move here. And again, just with the way the relationship is with my parents, we were like, we give it like 3 years tops until they're in Texas. And we kind of laughed. And within 6 months, they were here in Texas. And ironically enough, again, within a mile and walking distance of our house, which how that happened 2 times in a row, I have no idea, other than it's totally a God thing. But yes, they are here in Texas. Thank goodness.
That's really, really awesome. All right. So before I move on to the next big question, I'm just curious. We've talked about some of the challenges with the transition to motherhood. What's the best part of being a mom?
Oh my gosh, all of it. It really is. Seeing these humans that are a combination of you and the person that you love more than life itself, and just watching them grow and explore and learn things, and now seeing them with a sibling and the way that they love on each other, it's the absolute hardest job in the world, but it is so incredibly rewarding also.
I have to say, Adam, Nick, and Tony recently recorded an episode about fatherhood. And
Mhm.
my wife and I have been thinking of starting a family, and but the timeline isn't right now. And I listened to that podcast at the gym in the morning, and I came home in the evening and I told my wife, I need to be a dad right now. And
Yes, the timeline.
really, I mean, it was just really powerful. And to hear you say that as well. And I just think a lot of the best things in life are also the hardest things in life.
100%. Yeah. I mean, literally, when they go to bed at night, it's like we sit down and look at each other and we're like, what in the world just happened? And then an hour and a half later, we're laying in bed looking at pictures of them, wanting to go grab them and bring them in bed with us. So it's the craziest, coolest thing. Yeah.
That melts my heart. That's so cool. Um,
Yeah.
all right. So speaking of hard things, what is the hardest thing that you've ever done on purpose, and why have you chosen to do that thing?
So I would 100% say what I just did, the Dallas Marathon was definitely the hardest thing that I've ever done, that I've chosen to do. I shared it some of my Instagram, but this is the first thing that I have ever actually trained for, which was a really crazy realization because I have been doing fitness essentially for as my whole life. And to realize that like, wow, this is my first thing that I've ever actually trained for, was kind of a crazy realization. But yeah, definitely the hardest thing I've done. And I think it was why did I do that?
Mhm.
Yeah, so again, I did my first half marathon in February, and that was kind of a goal for myself after having our second son, Wyatt. It was kind of like a goal that I set for myself. And I mean, I casually trained for it. I had done some running and I just threw in some other long runs and we just went and did it. And it was kind of just to say that I did it. But I kind of got the itch to do a full, life got in the way and I never committed to it. And I think after seeing Adam do Leadville and kind of the training that he went into, I kind of had this almost like FOMO of wanting to be training for something. Um, so I reached out to Jeff Cunningham, my running coach, and was like, okay, let's do it. And the rest is history.
So I would imagine Adam's training for Leadville at times looked miserable. I mean, at least through the lens of social media, it looked like he was not getting as much sleep as he probably could have if he wasn't training. And he was
Mhm.
also pushing through some discomfort. Now you saw that and you were like, I want some of that.
Yeah.
All right. So you start the process of marathon training. How long was your prep?
14 weeks.
Okay. And what was training like for you? I mean, was it tough to balance that and being a mom?
Um, at times a little bit, just for that. And I think that, any mom can relate to this, that anytime you're doing something like just for yourself, you have a sense of like, okay, wow, I feel really selfish for doing this. Which can be a fine line because, being a mom, like you do still need to have your own identity and the things that you do for yourself. But what it looked like for me, I mean, thankfully going into training, I had a really solid baseline as far as running because I mean, one, I would work out or I would run sometimes in like the CrossFit workouts that I would do. And then again, like I mentioned with Adam in Leadville, I was running just casually on my own, 2, 3 times a week. So I had a solid baseline going into it. But what it looked like was I would just wake up at whatever time needed again around that like 5:30, 6 o'clock and just hit my neighborhood, get the miles in, and then be back home ready for mom duty when Adam had to leave for work. And again, super fortunate that he also is up and working out. So again, it's like there's somebody here at the house, in the garage or in the house, and then I could go out and do the running that I needed.
Yeah. So a team effort for sure, both ways. And so you build up. What's your longest run before the marathon?
22 miles.
Okay. How did that go for you?
It actually went incredible. I was super surprised at how well it went. But definitely after I got that one under my belt, the confidence boost that I got for the marathon was huge.
Yeah. And then so to fast forward real quick and then we'll come back. What was your total time for the marathon?
325.
And were there seconds attached to that or just 325 flat?
I think it was 325.23.
Okay. Now I did see in one of Adam's Instagram stories, you stopped to hug the boys real quick. So if you didn't do that, you probably could have shaved off another couple seconds, but I think that was
Yeah.
probably worth it. You would agree.
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
all right. So race day gets there. This is your first ever marathon. How are you feeling at the start? You feel confident?
I definitely felt confident. Obviously, just like race day nerves were there. I was actually experiencing a little bit of, it wasn't quite IT band, but kind of in that location. It had been like the last like week and a half, 2 weeks of training that it kind of flared up. And, I had done massage, hot and cold tubs. I had done dry needling and it just like wasn't quite going away. So I was a little apprehensive and just nervous that that was going to flare up, like mile 16, 18 kind of thing. But at the start line, I was, again, nervous, but also just super excited because, it's this build up of the past 14 weeks. And this is the moment that you've been anticipating. So I was really trying to just soak it all in and enjoy it. But yeah, definitely a good combination of excitement and nerves.
Yeah. So as the race goes on, I mean, are there any moments where you have doubts, where you don't feel great, where you feel like stopping, or was everything so solid and smooth that the day of was just really, it was enjoyable?
It really was all in all enjoyable. My watch GPS and pace seemed to be off a little bit. So at times I like wasn't quite sure of my pace, but I just tried to stay steady in what I felt like I was doing. Yeah, all in all, I felt really great. I did however, it was like mile like 19 and a half. And I shared this on my Instagram yesterday, but we had to go over this little bridge and there was water flowing under it. And I'm assuming that it just threw my equilibrium off, but I got like halfway through this bridge and I had the weirdest sensation come over me where it was like suddenly I could not feel my legs. I fully thought I was going to collapse, and it came out of nowhere too. So it really freaked me out. Thankfully, the bridge wasn't that long, but as soon as I got off of it, I mean, I kind of like started to slow down a little bit because I was like, do I need to stop? And again, because at that point, like I've obviously trained and run these long distances, but I've never, the combination of nerves, excitement, race day, the pace that I was running, whatever it was, I didn't really know how my body was going to react and respond. So I didn't really know what was going on. Again, but I shot a goo, I got some water at the next water stop, and thankfully I felt great after that. And then, like everybody says at a marathon, and you hit mile 20 and it's like, okay, last 6 miles. And like everybody says, like you run with your heart at that point and it's one foot in front of the other. But I still felt really solid at mile 20, thankfully. I would say at mile 23 was when it was, okay, one foot in front of the other. You're so close. You've got 3 miles left. But at that point, I definitely was like anticipating the next mile. Whereas before that point, it was like, I was just running and then it was like, oh, okay, another mile. Okay, another mile. But at that point I was like, okay, where's the mile sign? But yeah, I mean, I truly did. I felt incredible the entire race. And I say that having only run one. So next time around, I might realize that I actually didn't feel incredible. But for now, I'm going to say that it was really good.
Were there a lot of hills in Dallas?
So there was really only 2 like major hills. And it was one of them it was like right before mile 20, I think. And it was a pretty big hill. It definitely rocked me a bit, but I was able to thankfully kind of get my legs back and not be slowed down too much.
Yeah. Near the end of the New York City Marathon for me, I mean, the whole thing didn't go as planned for me. But I was counting miles and just where's 23? Where's 24? Where's 25? Oh my goodness. Where's 26? Is this 0.2 miles? This feels like more than 0.2 miles. And I was just waiting for the finish. And I think it's really hard sometimes because there are people listening to this who aren't runners, but in life, I think we go through things that are really hard sometimes, and there really is no finish sometimes, right? You have a diagnosis or you're in a certain circumstance and you don't know when it's going to end. And there's a lot of uncertainty around that. And it's so hard because you can't just say, where's the finish? And
Yeah.
yeah, I think that's one of the things that I love about a marathon distance or any kind of race is you have this thing that you're aiming for and when it ends that you can stop. But at the same time, life and endurance in life is similar but different because there's really no finish line. I mean, there is, but you don't know when it happens.
Yeah, definitely.
So, all right, I want to ask this next question through the lens of your experience, because obviously Adam has his story to share about Leadville, but I want to hear your experience because I would imagine that's probably one of the harder things that you've had to handle, just being there, watching somebody that you love more than the world itself suffer. So what was that like? And like maybe just take us through the whole thing if you don't mind.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it was an incredible experience. It was so cool being there, especially after having heard so much about it and having seen Nick's story of it all and the documentary and all of it. I mean, I think anybody could have watched that and had FOMO of like, I want to be there and like experience that. So getting there was incredible. I'd never been to Colorado, first off, so it was absolutely beautiful. We get there and he's super excited and it's this cool little town and race day gets there and it's like 3, 2, 1 and he goes. And thankfully we had just so many incredible people there, the team around us that was there supporting him, helping him. So I mean that aspect of it was incredible. Seeing him the first few times, or we saw him at the first checkpoint, and I mean he looked great, he was doing great, felt great, everything was going just as planned. We see him the next point and he definitely looked not as great, not in bad shape necessarily, but kind of a little bit more phased essentially. At that point, I think he was kind of having a hard time already, kind of getting some food in, which was a little concerning, but we also knew that it was still early on. So again, sent him off after that second one. And then I think after when we saw him that next time, it was, he was still feeling good. It's kind of like he had found his groove again after that. And if I'm not mistaken, that was when we saw him at Twin Lakes. So he was getting ready then for, the 2 huge climbs, and we wouldn't see him for a while, but he looked good. He still was feeling good. Definitely was a little nervous to send him up into these mountains, knowing what a beast that next part was. And then while he was gone, and as we're watching the clock, and because there's the cutoffs and waiting for him to hit those, and some of those he was starting to get a little close on those cutoffs, and then I'm doing the math of, is he going to make it to the next point in time? So when we were waiting to see him, that it was nighttime at that point, to see him after Twin Peaks, and at that point he was going to be picking up his first pacer, Dan Churchill. We were waiting for him, and I think that was the first point where I started to have doubts and started to get a little concerned, because again, the cutoff time and where he was at, it was just starting to get really close. But we saw him, he came down. I mean, he was definitely a little beat up and a little rattled, but I felt super hopeful going into that next point because he was picking up Dan. So again, it was hard to see him again, kind of, frazzled at that point, and knowing at this point too that he's been through it. But sent him off into the night with Dan and felt pretty confident about that. And then the next time we would see him was when I definitely got concerned, because I see him coming into this field at this point, and he just kind of has this like glazed over look on him, which it was kind of crazy thinking back now, because I would see him coming in and I was reading one thing, but then the minute that he would sit down in the chair with us and you're talking to him, it was totally Adam. He was there, he was coherent, he was telling us things, he seemed great. And kind of looking back now and obviously knowing everything, it was almost like he was just disguising how he actually felt to probably keep us at ease and not show how the toll that it was really taking on him. And so got him all cleaned up, getting ready to send him off for this next leg with the next pacer, Austin. And, he goes to the bathroom and he comes out, and yeah, he came out and he was like, oh, I definitely have rhabdo. And I heard it and I was like, I just kind of heard it, and I should have digested it a lot more than I did. But at this point it's like 3 a.m. We're in the middle of this freezing cold field, and he's getting ready to go. And I heard that and I was kind of like, okay. And so he then goes off with Austin, and Dan and I get ready to go back to the car. And, Dan was like, how are you doing? And I kind of broke down a little bit at that point, because I was just like, again, you see the person that you love that is just like fighting tooth and nail to keep going on this thing. And still how much he had left. And so then we get back to the car, and I was telling Dan, I was like, yeah, he came out of the bathroom and said he has rhabdo. And Dan kind of took a moment and was like, okay, like, kind of like crap,
Yeah.
And so it just was kind of like, okay, we're going to keep an eye on things. And we just went to the next checkpoint, and we get to the next checkpoint. And at this point, it was going to be, the last leg when we picked him up there. And at that point, I was going to start running with him. So we were going to do the last 13 miles together, which I was so excited about. And we're at this point, we're waiting for him, and Austin had thankfully taken his phone. And we're set up and we're waiting for him, and we think we have like X amount of time. And Austin gives us a call and he's like, hey, yeah, we're like, I think he said like a mile out. And we're like, oh, wow, like they were able to pick up some pace. That's great. Like, let's get things going. I'll be ready for him. And I think it had to have been like 2 or 3 minutes later that we got another phone call. And it was like, no, you guys need to get a medic and send him up here. Like, he's done. And we're at the base of this mountain, and there's like 0 service, and it's this like spotty communication, everything that's going on. And it was actually A-Rod from BPN, and he sent 2 guys off to go get the medic, and they essentially like run to one point, and then we see this medic truck light up its lights and just go up the mountain, and we're standing there, and I'm kind of like, and I think throughout the entire process, I think there was so much like anxiety and excitement and just so much going on that it like didn't really hit me. Because I get this call that no, he's done, we need the medic. And I think some people would have maybe immediately like break down or burst into tears. And I was obviously like shaken up, but I don't think it like truly registered with me. And again, there was just so much adrenaline of everything going on. But the medic truck goes up, and then we're just kind of waiting at this point, and we're waiting and we don't see anything. And then all of a sudden the truck comes back down with its lights, and it just like drives right past us. And I was still with a few other people, but nobody that was in communication with everything. And we see this truck go by, and we're like, what the heck? Like, nobody has called us, told us, like they didn't send one person. We're like, what is going on? And so long story short, we get all of our stuff together, we hop in the car, and we start driving down the mountain, because we're like, we have to like go find them. And again, kind of long story short, come to find out he wasn't actually in that truck. He had to get in another random stranger's truck that was up in the mountain that brought him down a little bit, that he then met an ambulance, and they took him to the hospital. So again, throughout all this, like nobody can get in contact with each other because there's no service on this mountain. And thankfully Leadville is so tiny, but we get back into town, and we get to one of the race tents at the bottom or by the finish line. And somebody hops out that was with us, and they just start saying Adam's name. And they're like, oh yeah, I think we heard that over the radio. He's going to be at the hospital. And, an ambulance got him. He's going to be at the hospital. So we beeline right over to the hospital. We get there, and I come running in, like saying Adam's name, like he's going to be there immediately. And they're like, oh yeah, like we've heard his name, but he's not here. All of our ambulances are out right now. Like, just like, I'm not too sure. And I'm kind of like, where is my husband and what is going on? Because I also like don't really know what has happened. I just know that it was like, he's done, he can't go any further. I don't really know what caused that. And so, he finally gets to the hospital, and the minute, they had to do some stuff with him, but the minute that they told me that I could come back, I mean, I just started walking towards his room, and I think that was when it finally hit me. And of course, I mean, I just like burst into tears, and then I walk into his room, and I mean, poor guy was just, he looked terrible and was out of it, and, had oxygen on him. And I just like come in sobbing. And, again, like we said in the beginning, this incredible man is apologizing to me for not being able to finish and making us stay out. I mean, he's again apologizing to me for all this stuff. And I'm like, please stop talking. Like, you're okay. That's all that matters. And then I think he had probably mentioned it, but our son had given him a little dinosaur to bring with him. And he was like, I just wanted to get the stegosaurus across the finish line. And I'm just like, again, like, please stop talking. Like, none of that matters. Like, you're okay. So it was crazy. It was really, really heartbreaking to see somebody put so much into it. I mean, again, I saw the training, I saw the effort that went into it. I saw him at every single checkpoint, and to see him put in the effort that he did, and for it to be taken away from him like that, out of his control essentially was really, really hard to see. But I mean, also just like so incredible seeing him, and not surprising knowing Adam, but so incredible to see him push himself that hard to try to reach a goal and finish something he set out to do was really cool.
Yeah. I've teared up a couple of times on this podcast, and that was one of them. I don't know what it was about it, just the sight of you walking in, so emotional to see Adam, and Adam feeling bad that he couldn't cross the finish line. And
yeah, I mean, again, it's like, if you know Adam, that's no surprise, but it was really.
Yeah. But so, obviously he didn't finish, and I'd be curious to hear his thoughts at some point on kind of the whole, how do you grapple with that? You came here to do this thing, and, obviously the process, I'm sure, taught him a lot, and probably you all grew through that process. And might I just add, Dan Churchill was on this podcast, grade A human being.
Oh my God.
Like one of the best.
Incredible.
Yeah.
Incredible. From the minute that we picked him up from the airport, it was like, I instantly felt like he was like family. Like, we just immediate, like the way he can connect with people is truly incredible. He's great.
Yeah. And the Australian accent is a big plus.
Oh, plus. Absolutely. Yeah. It's like icing on the cake.
So, one of the questions I ask everybody on the podcast is just, what does the word endurance mean to you? And when you hear the word endurance, given everything we've talked about, your entire life and what you're still yet to pursue, what does the word endurance mean to you?
I think it just means, pushing through, not giving up, knowing that you're going to have challenges, but that you can do hard things. You can do the hard things that are placed in front of you. And, something that I've really clung to, and I think really resonated with myself throughout this training process, is that not doing something shouldn't be an option. Like, not getting it done shouldn't be an option. That whether it's hard or uncomfortable or whatever it is, that don't give yourself the option to not do it, to just push forward and put your head down and just do it.
I love that. And you and Adam strike me as the kind of parents that would do what I'm about to share. But when I was in middle school, I got placed in honors geometry, and it was the first time I ever got a C, or maybe it was a D. I can't remember. It wasn't good, but all throughout elementary school, never had any problems. And so I came home crying to my mom, and I asked her if I could drop down to the regular geometry class. And she said, "Of course, honey, like no problem." And so I went upstairs, minding my own business. My dad got home from a super long day of work in New York City, and I heard him talk to my mom. And then he came upstairs and opened my door, and he said, "Joseph Anthony." He's like, by the way, nobody calls me Joseph Anthony except my parents or my grandparents. But he said, "No, there's no chance you're dropping this class." He goes, "We're going to figure this out." And so he sat down on the floor of my room with me for like 3 hours and learned geometry with me again. And I didn't quit, and I stayed in it. And I'm so glad that I learned that lesson then and over and over and over again. But I could only imagine what Noah and Wyatt and child number 3 and 4 and 5 and 6, just kidding,
Yeah.
will learn from you guys in the area of endurance.
Yeah, absolutely. I can totally see us. I can totally see us being the parents that would do that. But yeah, definitely want to instill in them early on. And we tell Noah now all the time, like, you can do hard things. Over the summer he did the ISR swim, so infant swim rescue classes. And it was his first experience really swimming and in a pool and everything. And every single day before we would get there, he would, we would tell him, you can do hard things. And ironically enough, too, his teacher, his instructor, that was like her phrase that she would tell the children before they got in the pool, was that you can do hard things. So when we met her, it was like, wow, this couldn't be a more perfect match. But we tell Noah all the time that you can do hard things. Sometimes he'll say like, oh, I can't do it. And we're like, we don't say that word. You can do it. You can do hard things. We got to figure it out, and we'll figure it out together. So yeah.
That's such a great message. That is the Project Endure motto: do hard things.
Yeah, I have it tattooed on me. So
Do you actually? I did not know that.
down my spine it says, I can do hard things.
When did you get that tattoo?
A couple months back.
Okay. Wow. I didn't know that. So I'm actually planning on getting similar words, just do hard things, tattooed soon. So, oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. I had read, again, I think early in the year, Glennon Doyle's book, I think Untamed. And in there, she uses the phrase a lot, like, we can do hard things. And then again, with that whole experience with Noah and swim and his teacher, and, I can do hard things. And then watching, kind of circling here, but watching your child say, I can do hard things, truly face a genuine fear of, at that time, swimming and learning to swim, and watching him truly live that out and believe it in himself and say it. I was like, okay, like, I have to get that. So it's really cool.
That's amazing. This is not important for the podcast, but I'm just curious. Is that the class where I've seen videos online of instructors almost dunking infants underwater and then they just float on their back?
Yeah. And they tell you in the beginning too, like, I'm not just going to like throw your child in the pool, but yes, they essentially do kind of like, especially the younger babies, kind of like from, not too far from the water, drop them and then let them get that floating feeling and figure that out. But yeah, that's the class.
Will Wyatt go through something similar?
He did. They both did it at the same time. And I will scream it from the rooftops that it is the best investment we have ever made for our children, especially living in Texas. We're in water a good amount of the time during, the really hot months here, and they are both little fish now. So it's such a relief to be able to take them to the pool and not have just fear and anxiety with them around the water. So yeah.
Yeah, that's special. All right. So the last question of the podcast is a special one for me and for the listeners, because there are people out there who are going through all sorts of things in different seasons of life, facing different challenges, butting up against different adversities and resistances. And in a second, you'll have the opportunity to say whatever it is that you want to say to those people, but also as a parent to Noah and Wyatt and whatever future children you and Adam have together. I'm sure there are going to be plenty of times in life where your own children need this message. And so if somebody out there is going through a hard time, or someday in the future you have to encourage your own children, what would you say to them?
Again, just like what we were talking about, that you can do hard things, that to just truly believe in yourself, know what you're capable of, know that whatever's been placed in front of you, whatever you're dealing with, that it's not a mistake. It's not a punishment. It's there to grow you, to challenge you, to push you. And that whatever it is, you're capable of it. And whether that means also asking for help or finding resources, that's okay. that again, that you're capable of doing whatever you put your mind to. So again, if there's a challenge in front of you that you need to overcome, that you can do it, that you're truly capable of anything.
I second all of that. And I think that's a really good message to end on. Now, Shea, one, thank you so much for sharing your time, your story, the messages that we talked about. And also, if something you said resonated, or for some reason people don't follow you or know about you and they want to learn more, where's the best place for people to go and connect with you?
Yeah, I want to say super active, but I try to be super active on Instagram, and my name is just at Shea Klink. So lots of pictures of Adam and the boys.
Awesome. Well, Shea, I can't thank you enough. And I'm really looking forward to seeing what you do at Boston and beyond. And just thank you again for the way you show up.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
If you enjoyed this episode of the Project Indoor podcast, go ahead and subscribe, leave a review on your platform of choice, and share this episode with a friend. It helps us get more conversations like this out to more people like you. We appreciate you, and we'll talk to you next time. And one more thing. If you're looking for a community of people all striving to be better together, check out the Project Indoor Hard Things Club. The link is in the description below. We'd love to have you.